Hi everybody, this is Laura, City Scrapper. Thank you so much for joining me on my channel today. Today I have a layout that I made for a Punched Out Thursday to Die For. In a Punched Out Thursday to Die For, we use our punches and our dies and we create scrapbooking layouts. Today I am continuing my work on an older album of my younger daughter Julia's that I selected that I wanted to try to get scrapbooked. I chose this photo of a whole bunch of turtles on a log at a lake near where I live, and I cut it in a circle using my Creative Memories circle cutters. And years ago, I used to pick out a photo and then I would decide what collection I thought would be best with that photo. And I still do that, but sometimes I get really excited about techniques and about collections, and I will think more about what collection I'm using and then try to find matching photos. But I really like the idea of picking a collection to go with the mood of the photo. So as soon as I saw this photo, I was thinking that the Simple Stories, Simple Vintage Weathered Garden collection would go really, really well with it. So I decided that I was going to use that collection to match this photo. I first used this collection in a My Creative Scrapbook kit, and I liked it so much that I went out and bought even more of the papers and embellishments so I would have a lot to last me for a long time. I used to buy a lot of different collections, and now I'm finding that I am only buying a couple of collections a year, but instead of just buying bits and pieces, I'm buying lots of things from the collection. So that's what I did for this collection since it was one that I really, really loved. So I started off with this piece of pattern paper. I took a stencil from my stash and I'm using some heavy gesso and a sponge, and I'm dabbing the gesso through the stencil. Now, this doesn't make a huge impact on the layout. I just think that it's a nice addition, but you'll see that on the final layout, you really don't see too much of it. But I do really like this technique, and I think that it adds, like I said, just a nice little touch to the layout. For the first time in a long time, I'm not using a sketch today. Earlier, I was assembling some hexagons that I'm going to put on the layout. I took my hexagon punches. I have a small Fiskars hexagon punch and then a larger one. And I cut out a number of pattern paper hexagons. And then I also punched out a whole bunch of white cardstock hexagons. And then I layered them up. I put three of the white shapes on the bottom, and then I put the pattern paper on the top, and then I inked the edges with some Distress Oxide. I used forest moss to ink the edges. And now I'm putting some splatters on the background. I'm using some watered down white acrylic paint. And I thought that I would rotate the paper rather than trying to reach over it, because then a lot of times my head gets in the way. Not that my head doesn't get in the way in some parts of the video, but I thought that I would be able to reach each part of the page better if I just rotated the paper. So sometimes when I put mixed media on the layout, it makes a huge, big difference, and it really changes the way that the background looks. In this case, this is just a bit of a subtle addition. My photo is mounted on some thick white cardstock, and I wanted to give it a little bit of dimension, pop it off the page, which is something that I love to do, especially to the photo. So I'm using some scraps of fun foam, and I'm fitting them together on the back of that cardstock. And of course, you won't see this, so it doesn't matter that I'm using all kinds of crazy colors. I'm going to put my photo slightly to the left of the center, and I'm going to have the hexagons going from the upper left-hand corner to the lower right-hand corner. I think that I've used a composition very similar to this before. I just thought that the hexagons going across the page on this particular piece of paper was a good fit, so even if I've done it before, I'm okay with using the same composition again. Right now, I'm just trying to decide where to put each of the hexagons. I didn't want to have any of the same pattern papers right next to each other, so I'm just kind of spreading those out. And then I'm also playing around with exactly where I want to put the hexagons and how I want to arrange them. And once I was happy with them, I got ready to attach them down. And then I was thinking that I wanted a little bit more contrast between the hexagons and the background paper. So I grabbed a dauber that I have used many times in the past that already had some black soot distress oxide on it. And you can see I'm really, really rubbing it because by the last hexagons, there wasn't too much ink that was coming off, but it was enough to ink the edges and create the contrast that I wanted to create. So now that I've inked all those edges, now I'm going back again and I'm attaching the hexagons down. And I'm using some ATG adhesive to attach the hexagons down, and I also use that same adhesive to assemble the layers that I told you about earlier, where I have the 3 layers of white cardstock and then the pattern paper on top. And I like to do that because it adds a little bit of dimension, but not a lot, just enough to make those hexagons stand out from the background a little bit. Now that I have all of those larger hexagons attached down, I'm adding some smaller ones. I thought that putting a couple of smaller hexagons along the outer edge would be a nice little detail to add. So I used up my scraps and I punched out a number of these smaller hexagons, and now I'm just placing them in a couple of different spots around the layout. And of course, I'm keeping them very close to those larger hexagons. For a little while, I was thinking that I might want to add just a couple of hexagons on some other parts of the layout, maybe along some of the edges. But then I finally decided that I was just going to keep this one line of hexagons and I wasn't going to add any more. But I was thinking about that for a little bit. One of the Simple Stories embellishments that I really like is their packs of foam stickers. And so I purchased one of those to go along with this collection, and I really like that set. And that's the main embellishment pack that I use on this layout. In addition to those stickers, I also fussy cut out some pieces. I mainly fussy cut out some leaves and flowers, and these are pretty much all from the same piece of pattern paper. And I love this one piece of pattern paper because it has lots of leaves and flowers, and I really can never get enough leaves and flowers on my layouts. So now I'm going to attach my photo down. I'm adding a second layer of foam in a couple of areas because the photo is sitting on top of the hexagons and I didn't want it to sag in a couple of areas, so I just put a little bit of extra foam to reinforce it. I chose my title from the foam sticker sheet. It says Happy Moments. I thought that would look nice in the upper right hand corner. I also selected a foam butterfly and I thought that might look nice right near the title. In addition to the title, I'm using several other elements from that foam sticker pack. All of those stickers come on some clear plastic, and I thought that in order to help me decide where I wanted to put everything before I stuck it down, I just went ahead and cut the plastic along with the embellishments. That way I could move them around the layout if I wanted to. So right now the title is not attached down, it's still on that clear plastic. But I am sticking some sentiments down. I have a sentiment that says Sweet Life, one says Today. I'm going to add one that says This, and then I'm also sticking those hearts down to the hexagons as well. And I put the hearts on the little hexagons. Now I'm adding some of those fussy cut pieces, the flowers and the leaves, and I put one bunch of them in with the title because I do like to have some of the same embellishments that I have all around the page worked in with the title cluster. Earlier, I placed a banner on top of the photo. It says One Fine Day, and I think that that might have been an embellishment that was left over from my Creative Scrapbook kit. I think that was from the die cut pack. I embellished some of the larger hexagons with some white flowers. Some of them were from that same foam sticker pack, and then some of them were fussy cut out from that same paper that I cut the leaves and the flowers that I spread around the outside of the hexagons from. I liked the way those white foam flowers looked, so I removed the backing and I stuck those down to the layout. I added a couple more leaves in the upper left-hand corner, and then I wanted to add these die-cut branches to the layout. I thought that adding a little bit more white into the layout would be a good idea. Even though I wanted to add white, I wanted to add a little bit of something to the die cuts. So I'm using my dauber and I'm adding just a little tiny bit of color to the edges of these branches. And I I'm afraid I don't know where I got these dies from. I got them many, many years ago, I think on eBay, but I'm not 100% sure. But they are unbranded. I use them all the time, but I do see a lot of really similar dies out there. So if you like this sort of look, there are quite a number that you can pick up. Adding branches and leaves and florals to my layouts is one of my favorite things, and I often use dies to make those. And I don't think you need a lot of dies because you can make them look very different on different layouts. Now I'm getting ready to attach my title down. I want to be really careful that I don't put these stickers in the wrong place. Sometimes they're super, super sticky. I don't think that this particular pack is extremely sticky, but I do want to be careful I don't put them in the wrong place. So I use my T-square to help me make sure that they were straight before I attach them down. And then I started fussing with the cluster of leaves and the butterfly that's right near the title. I really wanted to work that butterfly in there. I thought since there was a butterfly in the other corner, it would be nice to have a kind of a substantial sized butterfly in the opposite corner, but I just couldn't make that foam butterfly work, so I decided that I wasn't going to include it on the layout. But although I don't use that particular butterfly, I am going to add some other butterflies to the layout. First, I take a little bit of gel glue and I glue all of those branches down, and I just put a drop of glue at the base of them. I don't glue the whole thing down flat to the paper. I realized that I hadn't put any of these branches or buds up by the title, and as soon as I added them to the title, I felt like it looked a lot better up there. I had neglected to add any of the buds or branches to the cluster by the title, and as soon as I added some there, I felt that that cluster looked so much better. I trimmed back the hexagons that were kind of hanging over the edge of the page on either side, and then I inked the edges. And now I'm adding some fussy cut butterflies to the layout. I had already fussy cut these out and I inked the edges, and then I added a little bit of foam to their wings, and I'm placing them around the layout, and that foam helps their wings pop up because I have some adhesive on the center and I press them down the center, and I just love the way that looks on the layout. I added another very tiny branch to the title cluster, and then I continue to add those butterflies all around the page. I love that about this collection. Well, there's many things I like about this collection. I like the unusual color scheme, but I also really love the number of butterflies that are on the papers and on the embellishments. So that's another thing that I love about scrapbooking collections. So I'm finishing up with another butterfly. I just thought that I needed one more. Now I want to add some self-adhesive pearls to the hearts. I'm using some very tiny pearls on the hearts. And then I also put some pearls in the centers of the butterflies, and those are the smallest pearls that I have. They're very, very tiny. I started off by putting one pearl in the center of each butterfly, and then I decided to add some more. So I went back and I added one more to each of the butterflies, and I thought that that was just the right amount for this size butterfly. I also add a very small pearl on either side of the banner that says "One Fine Day." I typed out some journaling and I cut it into strips, and I'm inking the edges, and I'm going to glue them down. My journaling says, "Whenever we walk around Conger's Lake, we always check the logs to see if there are any turtles sunning themselves. On this day, it was a full house." Then I put the date, which was April 13th, 2015. So I still have a lot more pictures in this album to scrapbook, but I'm having fun doing it. So that was the very last touch that I added to this layout. Here are a few close-ups. Please check out the links to all the other ladies who are taking part in a Punched Out Thursday to Die For. We have Dorothy, Sonia, Kathy, and Ronnie Sue, and they're all amazing. I hope that you will check out their channels and their Punched Out Thursday to Die For videos. Have a fantastic week, everybody. I'll see you next week. Take care. Bye-bye.